Welcome to the Global Business Insights Podcast, brought to you by PSL. I'm your host, Max Kent, and I'll be joined by my co-host, Dr. Charlotte de Brabant. In Series 2, Beyond Business, we delve into the captivating journeys of the world's most exceptional business leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals. Our mission is not only to ignite inspiration and knowledge for the next generation, but also to illuminate the path for those currently navigating challenges. Join us as we uncover the remarkable stories that transcend traditional business narratives and offer a beacon of hope and guidance.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Global Business Insight podcast. And today I'm thrilled to have a phenomenal guest speaker with us today, all the way from New York, Matthew. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Charlotte and Max. I'm delighted to speak with you and your listeners.
Maybe Matthew, just to kick off the conversation for our listeners, could you just briefly just describe your background a little bit?
Sure. Well, currently I'm a teacher. I teach at Columbia University and NYU. I teach business strategy and marketing communications. And previously, I started my career, this is about the fourth career for me. I started in advertising, working on things like Campbell's Soup and Miller Beer. I helped Hyundai come into the United States, and then went over and worked for consumer product companies like Snapple and Bic, and went back into the consulting world and working with a big digital agency. And then about 10 years ago, I started teaching and doing consulting work. And it's really been a nice, sort of the nicest part of my career.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Especially I do so much teaching in my free time, and that's the little bit of giving back, right? And that whole fulfillment that you get out of it afterwards, and inspiring our talents of the future. But
Yeah.
maybe while we are on that aspect, maybe you could just quickly share a little bit more on your journey from the whole element of from consumer product brand management to your current role as a adjunct professor and founder of Rocket Market Development.
Yeah, so it's, it really was a nice transition because, going from doing things and, launching products and helping to combat a lot of the companies that I worked with were smaller companies going up about very large ones where you have to be more agile, more nimble, more creative, which I really like that challenge. And so it's given me a lot of stories and a lot of examples that then I can use into the classroom. And it's funny is that some of the things I came back and studied later from more of a theoretical perspective. Like, so for example, I taught a course on the dynamics of persuasion. And then I looked back and I said, well, that's why those things worked, or that's why that didn't work. So it's been a really nice sort of the combination, and both Columbia and NYU are very encouraging of sort of having this combination between the practical and the theoretical, more of this this academic practitioner model.
Sounds incredibly interesting, Matthew. I mean, I've been a lifelong learner in sales and business. The dynamics of persuasion is something I've worked around, worked with. So yeah, I'd love to know more about that. Is there any more you can tell us about that?
Well, sort of actually it's funny is it goes all the way back to Aristotle, in terms of some of the very dynamics in terms of the ethos, pathos, and uh, logos, in terms of having, needing to have the, the who the person is, the brand, is so critical element. And then the factual in terms of the reasoning. And then there's also the emotional aspect of it. And I started my career in advertising, and we used that combination. Never really thought of it in that way, but as we were having experts. So, for example, I mentioned Hyundai. So we helped Hyundai come into the country, and this was in the mid to late 80s, and no one had ever heard of this company. It was this South Korean company that manufactured. And so what we did is that Americans weren't just going to buy something because it was a low cost, inexpensive car. They had a bad experience a few years previously there was a Yugo, which was out of Yugoslavia. I don't know if you remember that,
Yes, I remember.
but
Yeah.
it was a Car and Driver named it the worst car ever made, and the consumers were calling it not the Yugo, but the no-go. So here it was 2 years later where Hyundai tried to come in. So what we did is that we, through advertising and through marketing, we established Hyundai as a company. The fact that here it was the largest shipbuilder in the world, it was one of the largest construction companies, that it was this huge company that you had never heard of. And so we established that credibility. And then 4 months later, then we said, oh, now, by the way, Hyundai is coming in with a car. Um, and so then people had that acceptance, the willingness to try. And um, it was one of the most, it was actually the best, uh, well received in terms of the fastest new car sales in the history of the industry.
Fascinating hearing that. And it's I mean, they've done a big push on it in the UK, where you say Hyundai. In the UK, everyone called it Hyundai. So they've just done a big push on this is how you say it. So it's amazing to hear that whole strategic planning phase that goes on before the actual product is dropped in, to
Yeah.
get everyone's psychology sort of ready and primed for that delivery.
Yeah,
So
we
it's
yeah
really
we were
interesting to hear.
yeah we were worried that they were going to call it, high and dry, which isn't great for having
No,
an automobile that you have to rely on it.
no, not at all. Not at all. Okay, so moving on slightly. Congratulations on your book. I must read it. Make It in America. So I will promise to read that. Just wondering what motivated you to write it, and what sort of key lessons we could learn from that, and our readers could.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, the book was published last December, so we're just coming up on 1 year of it now. And it's a story. It's just that I had been doing, in addition to teaching, I was doing consulting work and particularly helping international companies come to the United States. And there was just commonality in terms of struggles. And then in particular, there was one that really was an epiphany in 2016. We were helping a company. It was a French technology company. It was founded just a few years previously, and they had done a really good job. They had several hundred large customers all over Europe. And then in the late 2015, they sent a sales team over to the US to open up the US market. And the sales team spent about 10 months wandering around trying to get sales. They got meetings, but nothing ever closed. And so then they hired myself and my business partner, and what we did is that we did some intensive research and really helped them in terms of looking at the market, identifying who were the best prospects, what were they looking for, what was the value proposition, how to reach them. And then from that 6 months project, they then went on to get a foothold in the US. And then in 2020, they received $70 million from Goldman Sachs to help expand, in the US. So it was a really good. And then about the same time, I was doing some work with some of the chambers of commerce, the Italian American Chamber of Commerce, the German American Chamber of Commerce, the French, and the Italian. And in discussions with them, they were saying, yeah, this is a really big problem, is that companies, they come over here and they say, oh, we'll figure it out when we get there. And they say it's there's really a need for having that information and sort of getting that, even just as I say, it's like entering with eyes wide open, knowing what questions to ask, what are the potential issues and problems. And the book has, in addition to covering all of the bases about finance and marketing and cultural, it also has 15 different case studies where showing how different companies that tried to enter in the US, where they struggled, how they overcame it, and each one of them has 4 lessons from each one of the case studies.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, Matthew. And I also cannot wait to read the book, to be honest. You were mentioning your previous consulting experience, and if we could just briefly touch on the whole rocket market development, maybe you could just elaborate on the mission and then further services offered by USAcellerator under rocket market development, and how do you assist international companies then entering and scaling in the US? And this is very relevant for me as well, just because I myself work for a German company in and trying to scale more in the US. So I'm very intrigued.
So the company started we started it in 2014, and the focus has really just evolved over time to really focus in on entering new markets. And particularly, a lot of our work is now, for the most part, with international companies. We have a couple of US, but for the most part, it's international companies. And really, our mission is really to help them, succeed in entering and scaling in the U.S. market. And succeeding by the things that we help them to do is to provide them with intelligence and guidance. We typically will bring in experts, whether it's legal experts, help in terms of finance area, hiring. We'll bring in experts and connect them with them. But it's, to help in terms of even just finding the right resources. So that's a lot of what we do. Right now, we're currently working on some things where we're just sort of giving what I call like a market test or a market study. So it's a company, I can't say who it is, but it's a company that's thinking of bringing their brand and entering the US. They've heard horror stories about how expensive it is, about how they've seen other companies that came and failed and left. So what we're doing is we're doing a deep dive into, well, what is the market that has potential for them? Who are the competitors? What are the opportunities? And then also, well, how much is it going to cost in terms of, that's a big thing for them too, is how much they need to invest in order to enter. And
it's incredibly interesting. I mean, sorry to cut across. I mean, just that from both Charlotte and my point of view, we both work for international companies that have a footprint or have, as Charlotte said, tried to get a footprint into the US. The bit I'm sort of getting from you in this conversation is, make it in America is, some people talk about the American dream and anyone can make it in America and all that sort of stuff. I think it's what the book actually is how to make it in America if you're going to enter, because just like companies I've worked with entering into the UK, it's different. It's a different culture. It's not that you just throw a load of marketing budget at it and it will just work. There's all those cultural differences that you need to understand. And working with experts in the business like yourself, that's where businesses could save themselves an absolute fortune by working with you to enter the market in the right way. So it's a massively interesting topic for me and being experienced and seen it fail actually. So. Yeah, it's keen to know any more on insights on
the
that.
whole cultural area is really interesting. So I partnered with the group actually out of Finland, the Hofstede. It was based on the Hofstede research, and they have Hofstede Insights. And what they've done is they've taken Goethe Hofstede, Dr. Hofstede was really the founder of cross-country cultural research and communications, and they've been studying this for over 30 years and keep on in terms of improving the model and testing and whatever. But what they found is they found along 5 different key dimensions that countries are different. People in different countries are different. And understanding those, is really, so for example, just look at the element of time. There's a certain perception of what, is in the US. Some people will think we're, you go down to India or Mexico or some other, and they think we're overly punctual. Ask the Swiss or the Germans, and oh, those, the Americans are very lax. But understand, so that's just one of the dimensions, and there are a lot of it. So that was fascinating. And so in the book, I give people a framework or a tool for them to then apply to their own situation. It's just like in teaching. It's not
Yeah.
like we're giving them the knowledge, but we're giving them the tools so then they can figure it out and then they can be successful.
Yeah, for sure. I was wondering how you balance the teaching with in your role in that with the accelerator programs and the other work you're doing, but it sounds like it's quite linked. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. The in teaching, it just as in consulting, you have to apply rigor. There needs to be discipline. There needs to be really, that level of really getting in, challenging what might be, sort of perceived to be common knowledge or perceived truths. You need to be very creative in terms of coming up with solutions, engaging students. You need to create an environment. So I often, when I work with consulting clients, I work directly with the senior leaders, and it becomes really more of a collaboration and a partnership in the best cases. I've also had projects where they said, okay, you just go do this. But in the best cases, it's working in partnership with them and really developing this mutual learning and discovery. And then the other part is just sort of my DNA and what I've sort of learned and love in both teaching and consulting is like getting satisfaction by helping others and seeing them grow and seeing them survive, thrive, not survive. Sometimes
I
they
know what you mean.
survive, but but hopefully thrive.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of satisfaction of it. And so that's what makes me happy.
No, I relate with that very much, especially this giving back aspect and seeing them be better than you can ever imagine yourself to be and helping them to
Yeah.
grow. And that's very much been my philosophy also when leading my team. So if it's the team or if it's a class of talents, you want them to do well and gear them up with all the what wisdom you can share with them, right?
Yeah.
But maybe if we just go a little bit more into teaching, which is also my passion, could you provide a little bit more maybe insights into the Industry Insider course, which you developed at Columbia University, and how does this course address all this dynamic nature of the marketing communication industry?
Yeah, so it's a course that I developed. It's at Columbia. There's students are getting a master's in strategic communication, and we have a very big international population with people from all. I think it's like 60 different countries that have come in, and so coming to New York and coming to this industry is often very new to them. So this is a core course that they take as that they first entering the program. And the purpose of it is to give them an exposure to learn about, well, what is the communication and marketing industry? Who are the players? How are the pieces? What's happening? And being in New York and being associated with Columbia, I'm very fortunate is that I get to bring in um, people and we do exercises and workshops with the students. This past semester, I had a chief communications officer from Colgate Palmolive. I had the chief branding officer from Google. I had senior people from MasterCard. It came into someone from Adidas that came into the classroom, and one thing is just sharing, but then also interacting with the students and really, you know, hearing their thoughts and expanding and I tell the students this is that my secret is that I learn more than they do, because you're right that the industry is changing all the time. Right now the hot button is about AI and how that's going to influence things, and all of those things we're exploring. And what I try to do is that give the students not the answers, but a way and sort of how they can figure things out and understand what's happening, and then be on the lookout for things that are going to be happening, because you know the life cycle of any course is probably the information is maybe 2 years at most.
Makes sense. It's massively inspiring. I mean, it's sort of thing where I'd love to do a course like that, and it's I can imagine I'd learn a huge amount from you doing it. I'd love to go to Columbia University and actually do that myself. But it's I can imagine in this sort of business environment, it's a very different environment to teaching school children, for example, because you're collaborating with people who are coming from the industry, so they've got their own knowledge, and you will obviously learn from what they're telling you and then lead their thoughts. So it's a different environment to something I've not done a master's degree, and that I'd love to be in that environment. It sounds like a really collaborative sort of learning experience.
Yeah, it's also very hard in terms of teaching. One book that we were given was called The Courage to Teach, in the sense that as a teacher you're going out there and you're really exposing yourself, because is that if you're in a classroom and you see the teacher who's faking it or making up things, the students know in a second. So you're really it's hard work, but it's so satisfying.
Yeah, I can imagine how rewarding it is. So just on your professional journey, a lot of these podcasts have been about the professional journey of people. Has any of those kind of your previous roles, I'm sure, have shaped how you work with your students and work with your clients right now? Is there any sort of particular moments you could share that might help us
Well, I
understand that
think
a bit further?
Yeah, well, I think it's always been, I've been fortunate, whether I was working in advertising or I was working on the marketing side, it was always about launching new products, about entering new markets, about, not keeping the status quo, but sort of always pushing and moving. And so that was sort of, something that I really appreciate the challenge,
Yeah,
and get tremendous satisfaction. It's amazing, or such a kick.
yeah,
I can walk through a supermarket and take a look at some of the products that I helped to introduce, and that also translates in terms of now helping with international companies. That same thing about entering new markets, and in some ways it's even more challenging because, as you had said, there's the cultural changes, there's the US legal system, and
yeah.
it's so complicated and difficult to maneuver through. So helping people in terms of we don't make it easy, but the benefit is that there's such huge potential upside, and that companies can come here, and you know all of there's so many companies that I could mention, is that within less than a year, all of a sudden the US becomes their largest market, and
Yeah.
it's dwarfing all of their other ones. So there's such huge potential, but you got to kind of do it right, and having really the right people that can really be your trusted advisors and helping you along the way.
Absolutely. And just let's stay on the whole notion of teaching and sharing. You also teach a master's degree at NYU, actually, for integrated marketing, right? That
Right.
whole program. So how do you see that field evolving, and what skills do you believe are just crucial for professionals in integrated marketing today?
Yeah. So the NYU is similar to Columbia. NYU is a little bit more, it's a much bigger program. So we have a lot of narrower paths in a way. So, but it's very similar in terms of, the challenges of both marketing and communication. Some of the students go into more specified tracks, for example, digital marketing, or getting into crisis communication or things like that. So it's a little bit more um, specific. And there's sort of this whole thing about whether you sort of need to be both a generalist and have I call it being T-shaped. You need to know a little bit about everything, and then having one thing that you really know and you really are terrific at. So I think both of the programs help you to do that.
I love that. I think I'll think about trying to make myself T-shaped and have that. Yeah, because it makes sense, doesn't it? You've got your one lane that you know, and then you branch out and have understandings of the other areas of your business. And I think, I'm a CEO of my own company. I have to understand those things, but there are other people in the business that know more about the other elements. So
Yeah.
makes total sense. It's been a fantastic conversation. I've been really enjoying it. Is there anything else you can sort of share in terms of challenges along the way? I'm sure it's not been a plain sailing all the way as it is for anyone. I mean, certainly there's been challenges in my career, and it's only really just beginning. So, yeah, anything you can share that will help our listeners, and inspire them would be massively helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that I've been very fortunate in terms of being able to then maneuver from, one industry to another industry, and be able to then take along with me like some of the learnings that, so for example, some of the early learnings I had working on Campbell's Soup, which is one of the largest, consumer packaged goods, some of the things, so some of those same principles apply, and then being able to then use that into different. So I've been very fortunate of, moving across different categories, whether it's technology. And, I think that the big thing I've always been is just being very curious, and then trying to figure something out. Advertising was a great place to start because you moved every 6 months or 8 months. You moved from one category. One year I was working on computers, and then the next one I'm working on beer, and then the next one I'm working on cars. And you have to be a real quick study and to move from one to the other. And that skill, and maybe it's just comfort level, has really steadied me well. So I've been very fortunate that way.
Matthew, well, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. Been a very, very, and for your time. It's been very inspiring for me, I have to say.
Absolutely. Likewise for me, Matthew, it's been a fantastic conversation. I could talk to you for a lot longer about all of this and really kind of get into the detail. Maybe we'll do long form podcasts at some point and have you back on to get into further detail on this, because I think it's absolutely fascinating.
Terrific.
Any further final comments you want to share for our listeners? Please let us know where they can get hold of your book.
Yeah.
We'll obviously put links in the descriptions and everything when we publish. But please share.
Yeah, so the name of the book is called Make It in America: How International Companies and Entrepreneurs Can Successfully Enter and Scale in U.S. Markets. And it was published by Wiley Publishing in December of 2022. It's available on, Amazon and all the leading bookstores. And so that's, and then my company is called USAcellerator. And the website is USAcellerator.biz.
Okay, wonderful.
I cannot wait to read it. I mean, right now is the time that I'm really looking out for these inspirational books. And after this conversation, I cannot wait to see you one time in person in New York, actually.
Definitely.
It's a lot more to talk about.
I look forward to that. Well, thank you both so very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much. And then also
Terrific.
thank you to our listeners once again for tuning in, and be aware for a lot more future discussions coming up with various thought leaders to share their personal stories. So thank you once again, and have a good rest of the day.